just so as to keep prices at a certain level. And many say that that's exactly what these other companies want to do. But there's no real reason to believe that that must be the case. And we're trying to also extract a few concessions from them before they restart. So there's quite a bit going on. Of course, we're also looking at concessioning airports, the airports. That has been a bit slow, but we're coming to that with the ICRC. Even our Nigeria Air is back for discussion. Initially, of course, you know that there were ideological differences, to put it delicately, between those who preferred a government-led process and those who preferred a private sector-led process. I think the private sector-led process worked, eventually prevailed, and we're at a point where that is about to be done. But there is quite a bit going on. And I can, perhaps refer you also to Alex. I'm sure you know Alex. He can give you a whole list of all sorts of things that are happening. Yeah. I'm going to leave BRF to Road Trust Fund to talk about tax credits for how we are paying for roads outside of government budgets and all that. Okay wanted to know about institutional checks that will be put in place to stop grant corruption. I think the main thing is that we've put we've empowered state governments a lot more now, so they know everything that the federal government is doing, and they're able to ask the right questions now. For years, nobody really understood the whole LNG, for example. Nobody knew how that was done. Nobody knew which account it went to. Nobody knew any of that. But I think that what we've put in place is a transparent process. We've also put in place at the National Economic Council, we have a committee. First of all, we have reports on all federation accounts every month at our National Economic Council meetings. We also have a committee that looks at all of the, NMPC, LNG, everything, that looks at all of that. So I think they're empowering the states to ask the right questions is because they have a major financial stake in how, government resources are spent. I think that's one, for me, it's the surest way, because at least it ensures that somebody somewhere will be asking the right questions, because they are at a disadvantage if if federal government money is squandered or stolen. So that perhaps will be the way to go. Obviously, the others are that there are checks. It is just that if nobody can ask the right question, and here nobody meaning someone with some authority, can ask the right questions, then anything can go wrong. But I think with what we're doing with the states now, the state governments will most likely ask the right questions going forward. Family planning programs to reduce poverty and to reduce population figures. Of course, as you know, even in India, those family planning programs are extremely politically sensitive, and most people prefer to find a way around it. Of course, China had a policy which I doubt you can enforce anywhere else but in China. I'm not so sure that you can say here in Nigeria, one child and one child only, and somehow people will cooperate with you. I doubt whether that would ever happen. But the approach that we've taken is this. First, we believe that one of the major problems with the population figures that we have is the fact that most women, especially in the North, marry too early, right? There's child marriages, and also because most women are not educated. A large number of those women are not educated. You'll also see that there's a correlation between the number of children that educated women have and the number that uneducated women have or illiterate women have. So we think that just improving education, just improving human capital development, in fact, generally, but in particular education, will cause a substantial decline in procreation, in the number of children that we're giving birth to. And then the whole campaign around stopping child marriage and all of that. We think that those will significantly impact population figures. Because when you look at population figures, the highest figures are in areas where there's early marriage, and illiteracy. Those are the highest figures. So we think that that would significantly reduce the numbers. There's also a lot of talk, and there's a lot of, a lot of discussion going on with the state governments around a proper policy on the number of children that you should have. Now, how does that work? There are those who say, of course, that you'll only be allowed tax breaks for a certain number, which is still the position anyway. But then there might be other ways of discouraging discouraging too many children by simply saying that you will be allowed some benefits for having a certain number of children, and you may not be allowed those benefits if you don't have that number of children. Those discussions have been going on, especially at the National Economic Council. But I think the surest, at least where we have a consensus, is around child marriages and literacy, improving educational outcomes, so that this might actually reduce population figures. But the truth is that we must address this, because in the next few years, if you look at what the statistics say and what the projections say, we will be third largest population in another 2 decades or so. So it really is a concern that we must address. Kanayo wanted to know about intervention funds and what has been the major challenge around the intervention funds has really been transparency, and how to ensure that it is not the same, that people who get these intervention funds are the right people, and that there's a transparent process of doing so. We've asked, and we've worked again with the central bank in particular on ensuring that we have a process that everybody knows and everybody understands. We were at the Economic Council, at the Economic Management team. We are expecting a full report on all that has happened with intervention funds from the CBN, and then to give us a process. What is the process? Because, in some cases you are not sure of how exactly people access these funds, and whether it's the same people who are accessing them and all of that. But we also are trying to see how we can de-emphasize intervention funds, especially, and I'm talking really mostly about the CBN, because really what we should be looking at is how we can ensure that people have access to credit, that business has access to credit, cheap credit. How can we do that? We've looked at a number of options in the CBN. One of them is how to ensure that the cash reserves of banks that are willing to lend money, that they actually can reduce their cash reserves, so that they can spend more money, but spend more money in designated sectors of the economy, so that we can actually have a situation where the banks are actually doing the lending rather than this process of intervention funds, which really should not be the primary way of lending, of giving money to different sectors. So that's my contribution to that. I really don't have much to say about the local content funds and the others, except that transparency really is what we've tried to emphasize with respect to that. Aisha, gender balance. Our current, if you look at the next level document there, it does say that we will comply with the 35% gender balance in appointments now. So if you look at it at the back page there, so that's really what we will do, 35%. And I think that we must be held to account for the 35%, because very easy to say so, but we must ensure that we do so, and that's why we have documented our commitment this time. David David talked about the questions around those who are saying that if we can get 10% growth GDP, all will be well. We shouldn't bother ourselves about corruption affecting 0.6% of GDP. Of course, if you look, one of the reasons why I took the figures, looked at all of the figures, I just didn't compare with GDP figures. Where we were earning the highest, and GDP at the time was between 6 and 8%, about 7% consistently over a period of almost 4 years. GDP, of course, at that time was simply a reflection the high earnings, But despite high GDP, there was no growth, the so-called jobless growth phenomenon and all of that. So really, my take is that no matter what the GDP figures are saying, if you have grand corruption, you simply don't have the resources to spend. And, it just keeps reflecting on the actual living conditions of people. It reflects on the actual conditions of infrastructure, etc. And really, there are those who have argued that perhaps what we should be talking about is economic development as opposed to economic growth, as opposed to growth. So where are the indices of human capital development? Where's investment in education, in healthcare, in infrastructure, etc.? And I think that once we take that view, it becomes very difficult for us to be under this, false assumption that high GDP figures necessarily means better human capital development or better human conditions and all of that. So I would stick with ensuring that whatever it is that we have, we are protecting it adequately by ensuring that we have a process by which people cannot steal money, by which those who control, those resources are not just allowed to pocket the resources. Titi wanted to know about the judiciary and corruption in the judiciary, etc. And frankly, I agree with you entirely that where the judiciary is corrupt, obviously, there's very little hope for much progress. But what we've seen also is that, in Nigeria, people say that corruption is systemic. In other words, it's not just one institution. It affects many institutions, of course, including the judiciary, everywhere, including even religious organizations, etc. Because there is almost an elite consensus around questions of let's not pay too much attention to corruption. Let's not say too much about it. There's almost a consensus. And when you talk to leaders, when you talk to even religious leaders, you find that they really don't want to address these issues of corruption. So when you talk about it to the judiciary, the same thing. Nobody really wants to address it. But one of the things that I believe very strongly that we must do, and which we're doing, is that we must challenge it, no matter how anybody feels about it. We must challenge it. We must challenge judicial corruption. We must ensure that those who are corrupt, even within the judiciary, are exposed and that they are made to face the consequences. If you look at the way that even our profession, the legal profession, I don't know whether you're a lawyer, if you look at the way our profession sees it, the elite, the professional, our elite, the elite in our profession, are quick to defend if an allegation is made against you. They're very quick to defend, whether or not they know the facts, whether or not they know the truth. Why? Because that's the way the elite defends itself. And that's, almost, as I said, an elite consensus around it. In Lagos State, and I think that it is possible, and we will do it by the grace of God. In Lagos State, when I was Attorney General, in 1999, I was appointed Attorney General. And one of the issues that we had to face was judicial corruption. One of the first things we did was to do a survey of lawyers practicing in the courts in Lagos, who actually go to court, in the courts in Lagos. And we did a survey of about 200 of those lawyers. And we asked the question, what is your impression about corruption in the judiciary? In the Lagos judiciary, we had very corrupt, highly corrupt, notorious. I remember the category notoriously corrupt, which was the worst category. 89% said that the judiciary was notoriously corrupt. 89%. Now, question was, so in all these many years since the state was founded, not one single magistrate had been reprimanded, not even sacked for corruption, let alone a high court judge. Not one. And all of the lawyers, 89% anyway, felt that the judiciary was notoriously corrupt. So we started a program. It was a big program, one around remuneration of the judiciary, a long story. Another around appointments, the way judicial appointments are made, were made. Fortunately for us, we had several vacancies at the time, so we appointed 26 new judges, and a whole different process of appointments, training and all of that, ensuring that these were individuals who had the right pedigree, the right education, all of that. And we were able to get 26 new judges, many of them very young. As a matter of fact, there are about 6 of them who were just 35 years old at the time when they were appointed, Then, of course, we looked at questions of remuneration. We had human resource people come in to look at remuneration. We decided that each judge in Lagos, once you're appointed, you are entitled to a house of your own, either in Ikoyi, Lekki, or Ikeja, depending on where you wanted to live. A big, house, four-bedroom house, boys' quarters, etc. We also gave them land, so many different things, and that was followed up also when Governor Fashola became governor. But then we also did one thing. We made up our minds that if you are ever accused of corruption, we will ensure that it goes through the entire process. In other words, we will not take it through our own Judicial Service Commission. We'll just send your corruption allegation straight to the NJC. The NJC then decides, and we take action depending on the recommendation of the NJC. For magistrates, we sacked 22 magistrates all at once because there were findings of corruption and all of that. We just sacked 22 of them. Judges, there were 3 High Court judges that eventually lost their jobs on account of allegations of corruption. When the World Bank did the follow-up survey to the one we did, asking about this question of corruption, in 2007, the World Bank and ourselves did a survey asking the same questions. But this time we're asking about just the High Court, not even about magistrate courts. 0% of the same lawyers said that the judiciary was corrupt. 0%. Now, it is possible that there will be people in there, and I'm not talking of the Federal High Court, I'm talking of the Lagos High Court. It's possible, but those individuals who are now judges, it's not that all of them suddenly became angels or saints or anything, but there was consequence, aside from the fact that we looked at remuneration, they were decently paid. But they also knew that every allegation of corruption will be investigated and there will be consequence. That's what we need in our country today, not the unnecessary defensiveness, almost, knee-jerk defensiveness that we're getting once there's an allegation of corruption. Unfortunately, it's always going to be a battle, and, I think that we lawyers are the right people to fight that battle, not just to protect ourselves, because this is really self-preservation as well, if we're going to keep the sanctity of our own profession and also our ability to earn money for doing the work that we do. I think those are about all the questions.